Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a serial killer film from Poland, Polish language English subs, released in the year 2019, directed by Patrick Vega, and this film is called The Plagues of Breslau. So The Plagues of Breslau are set in Poland, and this city has been besieged by these gruesome murders. So the detective in charge of the investigation, she's very troubled, but she has to piece together what's going on, and she realises that these murders are based on historic events. So she reads up on these historic events, and she realises that there are going to be 5 murders. On each weekday at 6 o'clock PM, there's going to be a new body and found in a new mutilated way. And so she starts to read up. She wants to stay one step ahead of this serial killer, but the serial killer is very, very smart, and this detective is lagging behind. So she's becoming very, very frustrated. So she teams up with a few government officials, and she's going to try and stop this killer before this killer completes what they have set out to do. So whether or not they can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Plagues of Breslau. This was a blind experience, and so I was going into it not knowing what to expect. It was a fresh slate, and that's something that I really appreciate, is that you don't have any sort of corruption of outside influence. And so I was giving this every opportunity to impress me. Number one, it's a serial killer film. I like serial killer movies, but more importantly for me, I want to immerse myself in the world of Polish cinema a lot more. Is that I am a world cinema fan, and Poland is definitely something that I haven't been exposed to as much as I'd like. And so I have seen a few films in the past, but they haven't won me over. So I was hoping that The Plagues of Breslau was going to be that film that blows me over and makes me want to check out more Polish movies. And so fingers crossed that this was going to be an uncovered gem, but unfortunately I was really disappointed, and I come away from this movie actually considering it very mediocre. And the reason why it's mediocre is because it doesn't want to put the hard work in. Now this is obviously a film that is inspired by David Fincher's Seven. And Seven is an absolute masterpiece, and the reason why it's a masterpiece is because it's very complex. There's a lot of hard work put into it, and this movie just comes across as a cheap imitation that doesn't want to put the hard work in and just wants to splash some really vivid gore. And that's one thing I liked about the movie, is that the gore is very, very provocative. It's a very graphic film, and in a world where it's so easy to offend people, I believe that a lot of directors don't want to do that, and they want to dumb it down and water it down. And that to me is just everything that goes against filmmaking, is that filmmakers should have the balls to actually provoke an audience, and I definitely think Patrick Vega does that in this film. Is that the way these mutilated bodies turn up is by far the best part of this movie. This is a very hard film, and it does rival David Fincher's Seven in the brutality department. And so if you think that Seven was brutal, The Plagues of Breslau is definitely right up there with the very best of them. And so the gore effects were fantastic, and some of the kills were outstanding, and I really, really liked that. But unfortunately, that is all I can say about the positives. I will say that the cinematography looked pretty decent, but that's where the positives stop, and this here is where the negatives start, is that, as I said, it is a cheap imitation of Seven, and it would have been better suited to be an episode of CSI. It would have been an interesting episode of CSI, but as a film, it just doesn't work because it doesn't want to give you any fleshed out characters. The main character, she's interesting because she's had a very troubled background, and you do get a glimpse as to what happened, but you just don't care because the movie doesn't really care about her. If the movie doesn't care about the characters, then why should the viewer? And ultimately the viewer doesn't. So the movie has a very hollow, superficial feel. It's a very empty feel, and because it's empty, the characters don't have any life to them, and it just feels like they're reading from a script. Is that the main character, not very interesting. The serial killer I thought was really weak, and the other characters that come into the film I thought were very weak as well. So the script doesn't allow any of these characters to come to life. Therefore, there's just a very strong dead feeling to it. I actually felt like some of the bodies that turned up that were mutilated, so that just doesn't have any life. It doesn't have any enthusiasm. Therefore, it just becomes very forgettable, and it becomes a TV episode. Is that TV episodes, you watch one and it's on to the next one. And this is exactly how this film felt, but to its negative, this is a movie, this is not a TV episode, and so that was a massive problem. You've also got a very, very inconsistent tone. Now this wants to be a serious film, but there are character behaviours that were really out of left field, very, very odd. And I love odd movies, but the character behaviours didn't match the tone of the film. So you had a lot of inconsistencies up and down, and it didn't make me laugh when it was trying to be funny because it's not a funny film. But instead of actually saying, okay, well that was strange, I was thinking, well, did what I just see happen? And I thought, well, okay, is this supposed to be a dark comedy? But no, and then it takes itself really serious, and then all of a sudden something else happens that is so far out of left field. You think, well, I'm being distracted instead of actually reveling in dark comedies, because I don't think it was supposed to be a dark comedy, but the comedic elements in there just makes the tone really disjointed. And so I just really didn't like the world that Patrick Vega created, is that maybe he was trying something different, but it really falls flat, and I really don't think it worked. And then I thought the ending, well, it's basically a whodunit. Who's the serial killer? But because you don't really care who the serial killer is, it just becomes a very monotonous experience, and it's an experience that really outstays its welcome by the time the end credits roll. And so that's basically all I can really say about the Plagues of Breslau. It's based on very interesting, a subject matter, but it just doesn't take any advantage of it, because I felt as though it was skimming the surface. It just wanted to churn out a film that was paying homage to David Fincher's Seven, but it just comes across as a cheap fan-made film. And I know that might be a little bit offensive to fans of Patrick Vega, but I'm brutally honest, and I will say if I like or dislike a movie. Movies are subjective, so if you like this movie more than I did, good for you. But for me, you have to have more than gore, and unfortunately, the creative kills and the creative way that these bodies turn up, in a mutilated fashion, it's not enough to hold up a movie. You need something else, and the whole film, the very disjointed consistency as far as the tone is concerned, the really empty characters, and just the feeling that you're watching an elongated episode of CSI just prevented me from liking this movie at all, and as a result of that, it's not coming recommended. I'm only going to give The Plagues of Breslau 1 star. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.